Hi, and welcome to the poster presentation about late identification for autistic women. I'm Clare Kumar. You're going to hear a little bit from all of the presenters here around our personal journeys, and why we're here today. I was diagnosed in April 2024 at the age of 56 after identifying for almost a decade as a highly sensitive person. It was only because I interviewed two incredible women on this panel. I interviewed Melan Diesel on the Happy Space podcast about her own late diagnosis of autism. And then subsequently to that, I interviewed Lud Milla about her book, The Canary Code. And it was through those discussions that resonated so deeply with me. I was very motivated to find a diagnosis to really understand where I am in this conversation. I'm really glad I did. In the past few months, I've had numerous benefits that have come to me. Not only this reflection on my life and understanding, oh my gosh, that was an autistic meltdown that time in the smoked meat shop in Montreal where I had a newborn baby and the hot coffee pots were there and people were smoking and I wanted to be anywhere else and I sobbed for the entire lunch we were there. It was a way to understand who I am and how I've shown up with greater clarity. So that's a huge benefit. I also, it's also helped me understand my compulsion to act as an advocate for social justice. I look through my career and all through it, I was noticing things that didn't make sense, didn't feel fair, didn't feel equitable, and raising my voice. It feels very reassuring to me to know that I'm wired this way and there's no point fighting it. I better just design the rest and recovery I need to be able to sustain my energy for it. I'm also more confident and clear when I'm speaking to others and asking for what I need. I now will be with somebody who's trying to provide me customer service over the phone, and I will tell them I'm autistic. I'm likely to be direct and very straightforward. And so please don't be offended. But I am probably, and I'm going to need all the information and I'm going to ask you all the questions. And so it sort of sets up an expectation that I can more fluidly move into. And I found that enormously helpful in the last week. It's also brought me an opportunity professionally to work with the Hidden Disabilities Sunflower program. Now, I already had a hidden disability, I have MS, but looking at autism and the challenges that are very, very present in a very inhospitable world sometimes, I am very proud to be part of that program as the regional director in Canada, bringing compassion to more people and hospitable experiences to more people in Canada and around the world through the Sunflower program. So I hope you get a lot out of this poster and think positively about how you can go forward as an autistic person in the world. And I want to introduce you now to Lud Milla, author of The Canary Code and Late Diagnosed Autistic Woman.
Thank you for this introduction, Claire, and for sharing more about your journey. It's been such a pleasure to share some of the moments with you and just the general community of late diagnosed autistic women. I was diagnosed in my late 40s, and that definitely changed a lot. I used to have the most horrible self-talk. Every day I would say things like, I hate myself, and other things that people told me, like, why can't you do simple things? What is wrong with you? If you're so smart, why are you so dumb? Which is like literally what I've heard basically every day, multiple times growing up. And so even though, I mean, I've done things, I have a PhD, I've done things that people consider very cool. I hated myself so much every day until I figured out that no, I was not like lacking willpower or just lacking something that I could change about myself with more willpower, but I just really need to respect my differences and keep building on my strengths and stop beating myself up for those things that society is already beating us up all the time. So my self-talk in the last few years has changed dramatically. I don't say those things to myself anymore. It took a while, but it's definitely a lot better. And then obviously it's been something that um, very much impacted my work as well professionally, because I've been working on trying to bring intersectional inclusion to the workplace my entire career since I fell into global diversity when I was in college, when I was 19. And it always bothered me why organizations pay attention to global level cultures, but not gender, gender, but not disability or race or all other characteristics that we have. Why can't our approach to inclusion really include the whole person, mind and body and culture and multiple cultural influences that we have? From social economic status and other factors. So when I started thinking about inclusion from the perspective of neurodiversity and individual level psychological differences, it really was the last missing piece for creating a system for how organizations can support the whole person and not just pick and choose. We support this aspect of your identity, but not this one. All aspects of our identity will be reflected on the psychological level of our functioning. So if we create organizations that are welcoming of different ways to think, intensity of emotion, how we express emotion, how we prefer to socialize a lot, a little bit, in depth, on the surface, if we provided opportunities but not forced into one way of socialization, our work lives and our overall lives can become so much better. So I've been talking about this and writing about this, and it really became this final piece to my life's work as far as my professional and academic work. So the Canary Code, that's why it's not just about neurodiversity inclusion, but really intersectional inclusion, which is something that, again, has been my passion for decades. And neurodiversity really was the final piece to that intersectional inclusion. Thank you. And I'm going to pass it to Angela.
Thanks so much, Lud Milla. I love hearing your story, and the path of negative to more positive self-talk, I think, is one that I know I share as well. I am now the host of the Autistic Culture podcast, but my journey is slightly different than Clare and Lud Milla's. I was diagnosed at 39, and I spent the first 7 years after my diagnosis feeling like I got some bad medical news, and I went hardcore into every therapy that there was, multiple hours a week of cognitive behavioral therapy and other things as well. I think I had about 30 different practitioners. And if you've ever seen an ad for curing autism, I replied, I'm on their email list. And I have bad news. It's really hard to cure autism, and maybe not even a good idea. But my background, which I think is different than a lot of women in general, is I was never very good at masking at all. So I was frequently fired from friendships, fired from jobs, fired from classrooms. Most of my teachers just put me out in the hallway for class because they didn't want me in the classroom because I asked too many questions, like Claire with her customer service questions, me too. So I was fired from everything within minutes. And when I began cognitive behavioral therapy after my diagnosis, I learned how to mask, and I made the world much nicer for everyone around me. So I made more money. I stopped getting fired. My family liked me. I, however, was moving very quickly towards total physical and psychological breakdown. I became non-speaking within 7 years, deeply depressed, many stomach issues, all of them, IBS, hernias. I had nodes on my throat. I had the beginnings of esophageal cancer. You name it, I had broken down in every possible way. And I realized that it was not the diagnosis that was going to lead to benefits for me, but really self-identification. So I love the name of this talk. Once I identified with being an autistic person, my life got much better. And I was able to do that in a way where I don't get fired so often. And that is because I've created a very low demand lifestyle. So I cut my expenses about 90%. I cut the amount of time I travel and just literally leave my home by probably 75%. And I changed my main responsibility from being productive to being emotionally regulated. So that is my job. And my benefit for me does not include my earnings, because my earnings have gone down significantly, but my relationships, my support system, and my physical and mental health have improved incredibly. And I'll just tell one quick story to illustrate this. So after being diagnosed as autistic, I was driving, after identifying as being autistic, I was driving with my husband, and there was some noise coming from the back of the car. Some water bottles were rubbing together. And in the past, what I would have done before I was diagnosed and after I was diagnosed, but before I started to identify as autistic, for different reasons, I would have ignored or tried to ignore that sound. I wouldn't have acknowledged I even heard it, but I would have been slowly getting more and more annoyed. My stomach would have started to hurt. I probably would have had to go to the bathroom, and things would be building and building without me necessarily realizing it. After I did CBT, I learned to consciously realize it and stuff these things down, which led to fewer meltdowns. But in either case, at some point, I couldn't contain the complete insanity of water bottles squeaking. And I would have had a huge fight with my husband. And then I would have had to spend the next multiple days doing relationship repair, which would lead to even more exhaustion. But on this day, which was early in my acceptance and identification journey, as we pulled onto the main road, I immediately heard the sound of the water bottles. I thought that's going to bother me. And I said, hey, can you pull over for a second? I just want to throw the water bottles in the trunk. And he pulled over, and then we had a lovely day. And it was masking free car ride. And that doesn't seem like a big thing, but that literally could be weeks. It could be a divorce. It could be therapy. It was definitely getting fired from work. So these are some of the simple ways late diagnosis can have a huge impact. And I'm really glad you are here. And our last participant in our poster is Melan Diesel. I'm excited for you to get to meet her.
Thank you, Angela. So I'm Melan Diesel. My journey, I think, started a little bit early in terms of late diagnosis as far as the rest of us who are here. I was diagnosed 4 years ago at the age of 31. So this is fairly new for me. But it's something that has been absolutely transformative in the best way possible. I would say that for most of my life, I is someone who would have been called type A, very focused, very organized, very high demand lifestyle compared to what you're talking about here, Angela. I was in 80 hours a week, no friends, so focused, checking all the boxes to do all the right things. And I was pressing up against burnout for most of my early career. I would say I had multiple burnouts when I was in college. I had them in high school. It became a joke amongst my friends that you could always tell if there were tests coming up because I was going to be sick. Not because I was avoiding things, but because I was physically shutting down under the stress of trying to do it all. And this is something that I just thought was a personality flaw within myself, that I don't have boundaries, that I don't know when to stop, that I can't say no to people, that I get for focus. And it's something that I struggled with. I was medicated for anxiety and depression for a very long time. And I can now look back with clarity and say that I think I was just autistic and I was not actually anxious and depressed. And if I was, it was a result of living as an autistic in this world that's not built for me. So I sort of started to suspect maybe a year or so before my official diagnosis. That process was quite long. But I made the decision pretty early on that once I was pretty sure, I was going to dive in, head first, both the all the way, up to my ears, in understanding myself better. So that very quickly led to a lot of changes, much like what you were describing, Angela, in my life. I changed jobs. I said no to a lot of things that I had never been able to do before. I started openly identifying as autistic. In fact, Claire was one of the first people that I had that conversation with. We had been talking about sensitivities at an event that we attended together. And I said, hey, turns out my sensitivity is something else. So it's been really empowering for me to be able to see my life through that lens of I'm not broken. I just now understand how to navigate this world a little bit better. Um, for me, it has also given me the gift of what I call hyperfixating with purpose. Now, autism has become my special interest, particularly as it presents in women, particularly late diagnosis. And it has been the absolute joy of my life to connect with other women who have gone through this experience, to connect with other women that may not yet know they're going through this experience, and hopefully help guide them with, a loving hand toward finding that about themselves as well. I have made an incredibly ambitious goal to help someday 1 million women discover their identity. And that's something that is really important to me. It's big and it's bold and it's scary. But through the work that I'm doing with the Late Diagnosed Diaries newsletter, a forthcoming book about late diagnosis in women, and projects like this with other amazing late diagnosed autistic women, I feel really hopeful that there's going to be more of these positive stories of women who find their identity later in life and are able to live with more purpose, with more clarity, with more well-being, finding their strengths and putting those to work for the things that are most important to them and not for the things that are not important to them. So thank you so much for taking part in this journey with us, for being here, for listening to our stories and the stories of all the others here at the event. Appreciate your time. Please do connect with us in the many ways that you can find all of us online. Share your stories and continue to share the stories and the importance of late diagnosis for women so that we can help more women find those strengths and find more peace with themselves.